Ahoy! The next New World patch is likely around the corner. There are some changes, many of them mechanics related, that I discovered and that I want to talk about. Quite a few of them have very direct implications on PvP and PvE damage output, so this should be interesting for a lot of you. Along with that, we also had some announcements for new server merges. I'll talk about that at the end. The first change was noted in the patch notes as follows. Updated all magic weapon buffers for weapon swapping. Swapping from magic weapons should be more predictable. There's actually a lot more to this one, and I'm not really sure why it wasn't mentioned. So yeah, as you can see here, swapping from magic weapons is a lot easier and it doesn't feel as clunky, and that is great, 100%. But this change goes way deeper. Beyond that, weapon swapping as a whole was completely changed. So what happens is when you're in the animation for an ability and you press the weapon swap button, it will now lock this weapon swap in that moment. So previously what would happen is if you did it late enough in the animation, then the swap would happen, otherwise it wouldn't, but staggers could also cause problems and so on. Now the swap is pretty much guaranteed unless you use it super early in a very long animation like crosscut for example. This is strong because it massively buffs attack combos between different weapons. Take for example the Greatsword, where both Steadfast Strike and Relentless Rush can to some degree benefit from quickly swapping to your other weapon. By doing so, you cut down the post animation of these attacks. There are also other ways to do that, but this is a very quick and easy way, and if you then immediately swap to another weapon with the right timing, you could get a very quick attack cancel onto the other weapon. That is now super easy to do. You just use the ability, press weapon swap at pretty much any point of it, and then left click around the end of it so that the attack from the other weapon will go through, and the game does the rest for you. By the way, I realize that this doesn't exactly look super fast, but that is because I am playing on American ping on the test server, so it's a lot more delayed than it would normally be, and the combo itself would be much quicker on good ping. There are only limited applications to use this effectively because many weapons in New World benefit from sticking to one weapon due to empowers and other effects that they have, but still, having the option to do these quick swaps relatively reliably could lead to some new commonly used combos. On the topic of hatchet and combos, the throwing side of the hatchet was also buffed. This is something that is probably known to most of you, but what's probably not as known are the implications of this for the mechanics, because these changes result in a very interesting damage increase. The first part of the changes was to rending throw, making it so that rending throw will no longer interrupt the player movement during the throw. You can see that you still get slowed down a little bit using it, but it's very negligible compared to how much more impactful it was overall. But the big change is to social distancing. The backwards jump, the escape tool of it, will now only happen if you're standing still or moving backwards. If you're moving forward or sideways, the throw will instead not launch you backwards and you can just keep moving forward the same way as you do with rending throw now. By the way, both rending throw and social distancing are a little bit different from infected throw in that regard. Infected throw slows you down a little bit more, but allows you to accelerate again faster than the other two. I don't know why that's the case, it feels a bit different. But on the topic of social distancing, they also say they adjusted the timing of the attack and the cancel windows to better fit the functionality while moving. They removed the stagger from social distancing, and they gave it a damage increase from 100 to 115% weapon damage instead, increased the slow from 25 to 30%. In my opinion, losing the stagger that you could only get while jumping backwards is fine, when in return you can play so much more aggressive with it. And on the topic of playing aggressive, there is something in here that's not really explained fully, and that's the adjusted timing and cancel windows. Because what happens now is that hitting this is actually different depending on which version you use, and this is very important. You can somewhat see this here, you probably have to feel it yourself to really understand the difference. And again, this is on very high ping, so this is not the best example of how well this can work. But basically, what happens when you use social distancing to jump backwards is you start moving backwards and the projectile seems to come out at some point of you moving backwards, but it doesn't seem to come out right away. This is something that I didn't really realize before, but it explains why social distancing always felt a little bit more sluggish when it comes to DPSing with it, aside of it also having a very long window afterwards until you actually recover. But when using the ability while moving forward, you actually don't have that same issue because the projectile now comes out from your body, which is moving forward and not at some point of the backwards travel. That means if you're using a combo with the right-click hatchet throw, maybe while moving sideways or forward, and you throw the right-click hatchet and then immediately cancel into social distancing, the attacks will connect almost at the same time. On the other hand, using the same thing while standing still or moving backwards, there is a significant delay before the social distancing throw hits, which not only slows down your damage, but also means there is more chance to miss because it takes longer for the projectile to actually reach the enemy. The same is also true when using it outside of the combo. If you're just running at someone using social distancing, it is much easier to confirm the damage part of it because the projectile just has a shorter travel range. As someone who really enjoys throwing hatchets as a secondary weapon in mutations, guide in the top right if you haven't seen it yet, I am all for these changes and I'm very curious how close the throwing hatchets can get in DPS to melee weapons now. The next change is one that happened later on the PTR and it concerns a variety of hard runes. The Cannon Blast damage was increased and it says here the damage was increased by 20%. What this actually means is this now has the same base damage as Detonate. Very interesting change, because Detonate simultaneously gets a nerf. The critical damage multiplier is reduced from 1.3 to 1.2. Along with that, the escalating explosion damage is decreased from 30 to 20%. Escalating explosion is the perk that you get on the Brutal Heartrune of Detonate. And this is now a much more significant trade-off. Your explosion damage is increased by 20%, but you take 15% more damage while charging. That part is unchanged. Overall, that's definitely a much more significant trade-off for this rune. Now I wanted to actually test these numbers just to give us a better idea of how the Detonate Heartrune and the Cannon Blast Heartrune compare now. The Brutal Heartrune of Detonate now deals almost 6,000 damage, but this is against a target dummy with very minimal protection values, so against most targets that would do less. The Cunning Heartrune of Cannon Blast deals 5,131 damage, but as you can see also immediately deals another 513 fire damage, and then keeps ticking for 513 fire damage for a couple of seconds. You get 6 extra ticks of damage overall, so roughly 3,000 extra damage. But that Heartrune is single target, and in many situations the AoE damage that the Detonate rune does will be more important. When we look at the Cannon Blast options, then we have the Brutal Heartrune with Explosive Blast, which gives you AoE but reduces the damage by 20%. Now, the damage value that you're actually getting against the target dummy is 4,275, with ticks of 427 damage. The extra damage that the fire ticks deal at this point is around 2,550. That brings our total damage with this Heartrune to around 6,800. So if you don't mind that some of the damage is over time, you can actually deal more damage with a Cannon Blast Heartrune. There is a significant downside to Cannon Blast though that XR pointed out to me. And that is that if you use Cannon Blast, it actually swaps off your weapon to Cannon Blast and disables any additional effects that you would get from your weapon, like for example Empowers. This is something that doesn't happen with Detonate, meaning Detonate has much more potential to deal higher overall damage if you're using any weapons with Empowers, and most weapons have some Empowers. Also keep in mind that when we're talking about damaging Heartrunes, there is also a new contender entering the field, which is the Heartrune of Bile Bomb from the Starstorm mutation. I already made a full video talking about that one, and there was also a minor change to one of the Heartrunes. Previously, the Brutal Heartrune of Bile Bomb said that the damage was increased to 30% per second. Now it says that the damage is increased to 150% per second, which I think is mostly just a description fix that makes it more logical and explains it better. It's because the Heartrune normally deals 20% damage per second, and now it deals 30, so it's an increase to 150%. Another change that happened that I haven't talked about yet is the Shirking Fortification nerf, reducing the duration of the buff from 6 seconds to 4 seconds. I think Shirking Fortification will still have a lot of value in many situations, but you have to time your dodges a little bit better now and can't just burn stam and always rely on it being up. At this point, a quick reminder that if you enjoyed the video so far, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell to see more New World related updates. In the next days I'll be talking about the sword skill trees, about shields, and hopefully also about patch content, assuming that we'll get patch news. But there is one more thing to talk about, and that is the server merges. So you can see here, there are quite a few servers that will be merged on December 1st or December 2nd, depending on your time zone, and there will be a 2.5-hour downtime for that. This particular merge is at least very good for the Australian servers, because Delos and Erido roughly have the same population as one of the current fresh start servers, so this should bring the population into a more balanced state. The devs have stated that there's currently no plan to merge fresh start servers, though I'm not sure if they can keep that one up long term. Some fresh start servers have very small populations, and I wouldn't be surprised if they eventually end up getting merged into other fresh start servers. We'll see what the future brings in that regard. For now, thanks for watching. SLOTH out.